Welcome to Backroom Talk.
Today we're talking about the fitness of the generation, the next generation?
I don't think fitness is the thing that we need to go after. I just think literacy is what we have to go after.
Do you think part of the loss of physical literacy is because of the connection to sport and thinking that movement isn't movement for life, movement is movement for competing in sports?
The reality, in my opinion, with kids is it starts and ends with parents.
To listen to more Backroom Talk, be sure to subscribe. Learn to design personalized programs with the OPEX system of coaching by heading to opexfit.com.
Well, guys, welcome to another episode of Backroom Talk. And Carl, today we're talking about the fitness of the generation, the next generation?
That's
our
fair.
Youth?
Yeah, it would be the next generation.
Yeah, we're talking about youth fitness and.
Or if you're next generation.
Next generation.
Yeah.
I think that's the right term. And guys, we're going to be getting into some thoughts on, why youth exercise is the way it is today, some of the good stuff that's going on, some of the not so good, and, kind of where OPEX stands on how fitness can be incorporated into the lives of our young ones. But before we get into it, as always, please make sure you give us a little review there on your podcast app. If you're listening on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to our channel, and we love to hear your feedback in the comments, guys. So please.
Did we see a boom in this stuff after everyone listened
to
our podcast yesterday?
No. I know. Come on,
Maybe
guys.
we need to incentivize them.
We do. I think we do need to do a review giveaway.
Yeah. You heard it here first. So I'm going to randomly pick one comment or review. You got to do both. And if I choose you, I will give you $16,000.
That sounded so so genuine.
I'm going to go in there.
Why 16?
I don't know. It just it's more than 15, but less than 20, so I don't feel that bad about it,
Yeah. No, we let's next week. Let's think this through, but some kind of giveaway, maybe a programming principles course, something like that.
How about the people tell us what they want?
Yeah, guys.
As a giveaway.
Drop a review and a comment and let us know what you would like to win, and we'll make that happen, okay?
Cool.
We appreciate your support. So, let's get into youth exercise, Carl. Big question. Why should youth exercise?
Oh, my gosh. Same reason why we should exercise.
To look good naked and run really fast
That's
and be really strong.
Be high performers. No, but really. Youth should move because we should move as human beings. That's it, right? It's like, I think exercise, when we start to say, why should youth exercise? I would just say, why should youth move, right? I think we throw exercise on top of it now because there's a lot of youth that don't do anything, right? They don't go outside and play. They're not utilizing physical expression as like this thing that they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So I think a lot of parents look at that, and a lot of parents they want their kids to be healthy, right? Like, they don't want their kids to be, overweight. They don't want their kids to be self-conscious. They don't want their kids to be unhealthy, right? So I think a lot of parents do see that happening, and they look at fitness and exercise as a way to combat that. Where in reality, what should combat that is, solid nutrition principles for kids and activity on a day-to-day basis. So most kids probably don't really need to exercise, right? Like, they just need to go outside and play. And we start to look at, what are we doing in exercise? And I know we'll get into, our beliefs at the end, but all we're putting in exercise is what we believe youth should do on a day-to-day basis outside of exercise, right? But like, when we look at like movement patterns, it's like, when we look at exercise selection for youth, we actually reversed engineered those from natural human movement patterns or youth movement patterns that they should be practicing and learning from a very young age. Those are things like crawling, running, jumping, throwing, catching, so on and so forth. And you start to see it. I know you don't have kids, but you start to see it in like I see it in like my son's friends, and coaching youth sports, and you ask a kid to do a jumping jack or a burpee or a crawl, and they're just like, what? They don't even know how to coordinate that, right? Or you say, hey, do a somersault, and they're like, I'm 9 years old and I've never done a somersault in my entire life. And for a lot of us older people, we're like, oh, that's crazy. We used to do that shit all the time when I was a kid. But youth, a lot of them just aren't doing that stuff anymore. So I think a lot of youth don't really need to exercise if they're doing all of those things and they're like exploring movement in a free play arena. But I do think exercise can be beneficial to make up for some deficiencies and movement patterns for 9, 10, 11-year-old that hasn't experienced those. And quite frankly, some kids enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, so largely it is an intervention for a lack of movement and a lack of physical expression, where kids just aren't getting this like free play, getting outdoors, getting messy, running around, handstanding in the park with their friends anymore. And so this is us as adults saying, ooh, there's a problem. And we're seeing this problem not just in kids' health, but carrying over to unhealthy adults who we know this, the habits that we create in our childhood, the behaviors and the feelings and emotions we have around, nutrition, exercise, how we interact with our family, like the stuff that we lay in as kids, that carries on to how we operate and the people we are as we become adults. So it's not just about getting kids to move, right? It's setting people up to be healthy, contributing, active, great members of society as they age too.
Yeah, it's and I said that I kind of glossed over the self-confidence thing. When I said the self-confidence thing, it had nothing to do with like a kid being overweight. It had everything to do with a kid being able to do things, right? Like, there's nothing worse than seeing a kid that is physically unable to complete a monotonous task. You know what I mean? So, we hike a lot around here, right? Like, I've seen kids unable to complete 20-minute hikes on a trail here in Scottsdale. Like, I've seen that, right? How do they deal with stuff like that? Emotionally, I don't know, right? I would think that because I have kids that have friends, right? So I'm like always observing like other kids' behaviors because I'm trying to like navigate and figure out where my kids sit, not in the pecking order, but kind of like socially and stuff like that. And it's surprising, when we look at like physical literacy or physical illiteracy of a lot of kids, and a lot of like Colton's friends are very like into sports, so on and so forth, and there's a couple kids like in our neighborhood that just aren't, and it's so obvious that the lack of being or the inability to do things physically, and this is like n equals 5. It's like I don't know this to be the case for sure, but I do see the kids that are unable to accomplish physical tasks are the kids that are a little bit more reserved, a little bit more shy, kids that obviously lack self-confidence. So I do think there's a very big correlation to being physically able to do something, and that like fueling the fire of like building that self-esteem.
Yeah, I mean that ability, that physical ability opens opportunities. It gives you the opportunity to do a bunch of stuff with your friends, have experiences, and when you're not physically able to get on your bike and go for a bike ride and have that, experience out in the desert for a couple hours with your friends, as your kids probably do, that closes doors, and it gives them, removes opportunities to socialize and engage, away from parents. And I have to think, again, don't have children, but one of the things you want to set your kids up with throughout life is as many opportunities as possible. So that seems like a problem. If kids don't have opportunities because of a lack of physical ability, feels like we should do something about that.
Yep, for sure.
Let's talk about, how do we get to, I think we should discuss, some of the problems that exist in physical education today and, why we're talking about this topic. But where did physical education as, a curriculum, as something that was in schools, where did that begin? Why did that become a thing?
Yeah, I mean, in this country, it became a thing post World War I. So after World War I, a bunch of soldiers were sent back and data started coming out. And the data said that over 50% of our soldiers were physically unable to complete their tasks, whatever their jobs were, right? Like most of the jobs back then were infantrymen. So I have to walk around, I have to, get into battles and so on and so forth. But 50% were unable physically. So the country looked at that and they're like, we have to set up that next generation, right? World War II. We have to set up that next generation to be physically able. So that's when physical education actually became a curriculum in this country. And that's when, the whole idea of rewarding kids for being more fit really started to come into play.
Okay, so it really, like, you think about like that period of time, like your ability to be physically fit, like literally made you a better citizen. That seems like something that had a good amount of value on it.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at where did fitness or actually exercising to be more fit, like what are the earliest recorded incidences? It's like in the Greek Roman times when battles were occurring, right? It's like we have to build soldiers. That's where it came from. And then when we start to get into where did it go from there? The Olympics started, right? And it was like the Olympics started with a 200-meter sprint. That was the only Olympic event for a very long time. And then they were like, let's do a 400. Let's do a 1600. Let's do a 5, right? Like that's how exercise really started to shift in terms of like we want to be ready versus like we want to be high performers. And I know we'll get into it, but we started to see that shift as well with our kids when we start looking at fitness to perform or fitness to live versus fitness to perform. And there's a lot of back and forth between fitness to live and fitness to perform, and we see it in our world all the time, right? But it's exacerbated at a kid's level because you have parents, right? And parents have wants, right? Parents want their kids to be this or to be that. And we all want what's best for our kids. But some parents are misguided, in my opinion, of what they want for their kids. They're like, they want to live through their kids instead of allow their kids just to live and explore and to do other things. But we'll get there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole rabbit hole that we will go down, but you start to think about like college admissions and what it means to be a great athlete when you are applying to these top tier schools. And I did watch that documentary that you recommended.
Yeah.
So I just think that's a whole other fascinating beast that has
what was it called
interfere.
again?
I do not remember, but we'll drop it in the show notes.
Yeah,
it was on Netflix.
Yeah, Netflix documentary. Just real quick, it was about how if you are being recruited by a university, you essentially get 25% more admission points right off of the bat. So when you look at like, is it called Scandal? No, that's a TV show. That's a TV show. Emma's like, no, I watch that all the time. So it was all about like, coaches and athletic directors being paid off to say that they're recruiting this kid that's applying, and they would get all of these admission points, then they'd get admitted, and then of course they would never actually row or play soccer or play tennis or whatever the sport was.
Yeah, but if you are actually one of those kids that's rowing or playing soccer or playing tennis at a college level, like that's a great, door into tertiary education.
Yeah, I got accepted into university in a backdoor way, actually. Well, I don't want to say backdoor, but there was no talk about transcripts or SATs or anything like that. It was literally like I gave my information to the recruiting coordinator. They submitted it to the school, and I got like this acceptance email in like an hour. So I mean, there's a lot of pull there, but that's a totally different conversation. A lot of these universities are driven by revenue brought in by these big college sports.
Yes, indeed. Well, talk to me a little bit about like what your experience with physical education was like as a kid.
Oh man.
And then let's juxtapose it with what your kids are going through right now.
Yeah, that's a good experiment. Gosh, I have really, really good experiences in physical education as a kid. I remember, from first grade, it actually started. second grade, because first grade was my first experience. The entire school year was built around this event at the end of the year that was called Field Day. And on Field Day, it was like the elementary school Olympics, and it was like, and I'm not saying this is healthy, but this is what had me engaged. It was all about competing with your classmates in your grade. So it was almost like crowning the fittest boy and girl in first grade, second grade, blah blah blah. And I didn't get that crown when I was in first grade. There was a kid named Sam. Are you watching this? Sam Nigro, it was his name. He beat me in the 1 mile. I remember that. Yeah, he beat me in the 1 mile. So it was like we would rope climb. There was like a sit and reach test, a broad jump, a 60-meter dash, a 1 mile run, max pull-ups, and I think that's it. And I think we played a couple games just like for fun between events. But I think it was those six or seven events. Yeah, Sam beat me in that mile. So the entire curriculum was all around like not getting better at those things specifically, but just introducing you to things and skills involved in those events. And that was my entire elementary school career, was exploring different games and sports that would lead to exposure in those areas. But yeah, that was elementary school for me. It was someone else would have a totally different experience that was there with me. That's just where my brain was. I was like, end of the year, this thing, I'm a little bit competitive. So that was my elementary school experience in physical education.
Yeah, I'm sure. Like, I grew up in Australia, so it was definitely different. But we had 3 big events throughout the year. We had swimming carnival, which I loved. We had cross country, which I hated, and then we had athletics carnival, which was a bunch of different pieces, kind of like what you described there. Mm-hmm. But our physical education was very much like tied to those 3 events. So we'd have, swimming lessons in preparation for swim carnival. We'd run laps, around the school to prepare for cross country. And then we'd, practice high jump and long jump for athletics carnival. But it was all very much, trying to get kids to perform and pushing them to do well at these events, less so learning to love and enjoy and express oneself through movement.
Yeah. I remember, let's say we had gym 3 times a week. Twice a month would be sport specific. And those were the days that I really looked forward to, because those were the days where I was like, I got to like show off how good I was at sports, right? 'Cause like those other days were just like games where it's like you're running and you're climbing and you're doing these things. And when they put like a basketball in your hand, you're like, okay. And you're obviously like 3rd, 4th grade, you're like trying to impress other girls or other boys and stuff like that, right? But that's what stands out to me was like, the games were always really fun. And when they put like footballs and basketballs and stuff like that in your hands, I just remember how fun that was. But I remember that there was a lot of kids that just weren't quote unquote good enough at sports to be able to like play a game, right? So there was always like barriers in games. It wasn't just like, all right, 5-on-5 basketball. It was like, okay, you have a basketball in your hand, you could take X amount of steps and then you have to pass it to someone. And then, so it was almost like a mind/physical event, which was interesting. I thought it was fun, right? But yeah, my experience though in elementary school was probably super biased on what I was really excited about, because I probably forgot about all the really boring shit that we did and the stuff that I thought wasn't useful at all. And the only thing that's in my head is all of those things. But to compare it to what my kids are doing right now, there's nothing like that. Yeah, there's nothing like that. There's we do have physical education here, and it's like in a thing they call specials. So they have specials once a day. Physical education is 1 day per week, and it is very confined. I remember in elementary school, we had like a huge basketball court. We had a football field. We had a soccer field. We had like a lot of space to play with. Right now, I think this is the case in most elementary schools, is like most elementary schools don't even have a basketball court. Like they don't have a gym, like a typical like gym. it's just like a room. And that's the case with my oldest. It's just like this room. I remember the first time walking into it, I was like, how the fuck do you fit 20 kids in here and express yourselves physically? And I remember asking Colton, I'm like, so what do you guys do in gym? And he's just like, well, it depends. One day or 1 week we might go and take 2 laps outside, and then that's it. Another day we might come in and play games that have nothing to do with physical activity. And I just found that so weird, right? And his gym teacher is actually, she lives in our neighborhood. She's a friend of ours. And she even talks about it, like how she wants to do so much more physically with the kids, but they're just tied to this curriculum that's given from up top, where it's like, these are the only things that you can do. And it's, and there's some good things. It's really based on inclusion and not making anyone feel like an outcast. And in my experiences in gym, it wasn't like that at all. It was like, the athletic kids are going to have a lot of fun, and the non-athletic kids are not going to have a good time at all. So maybe there's some good things in that. But yeah, I wouldn't even call it physical education.
As a pretty non-athletic kid and someone who had quite a lot of anxiety tied to a lot of physical education, like I remember doing the beep test and just like really being very like nervous and stressed out about doing that because I knew I wasn't going to do well. Like I was not good at the beep test. But I think you learn lessons in that. Like you do become more resilient being that non-athletic kid in an athletic environment, learning to navigate that, being a little bit uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we don't want kids bullying one another, acting superior because they're Carl Hardwick, first grade runner-up of the
first grade loser. Yeah, I lost. Man, ow, that stings.
No, but I think
that stings.
There's got to be...
Gosh. Oh, man. That brought up some old pain.
Right up until that point.
Yeah, some old pain.
No, I think there's lessons inside of that, though.
Yeah, you're not going to win. You're not going to win at everything. I think that was what I learned in first grade. It's like you're not going to win at everything. And if you give a shit and you do want to win at it, you have to do something about it, right? Like you have to get better at that thing. And I'm not saying that's missing today. I don't want to be one of those old guys that's like, back in my day, we had to work for shit. I'm not saying that, but I do think the outlook is a little bit different.
Is it lack of resources? Is it like concern around kids getting hurt? Is it concern around their feelings getting hurt? Like what's?
No, there's a lot of shit that teachers have to fit into a school year.
Yeah.
I think this, not that the standards are high, the standards are actually lower because they want to fit more volume in, right? So the volume is so high in the things that they have to do. And even talking to my kids' teachers, they're just like, this is fucking ridiculous. Like we have to do this, we have to get this, we have to do this. It's all like this easy merit test, and we have to prepare them for the end of the year. We have to fit all this curriculum in before then. I think they're not as targeted with the things that they want to do really, really well. They're just doing a lot of things. And where that really showed was when the kids went online last year and they took away a lot of those things. And outside of being online and that just being a really shitty way for a lot of kids to learn, a lot of kids did start to see this happen in very specific areas because they were focusing so much in those very specific areas. So we saw Colton like really fall in love with history over that time because they really they put a huge emphasis on history. So I think it's, I think they're just trying to do too many things, and physical education is going to fall by the wayside when they try to put too much curriculum in.
I mean, the reality is for most of our jobs, we don't need to be very physically fit. Like it's no longer a situation where you're trying to prepare a bunch of kids to go to war and, fight on the front lines. Like that's not how wars are fought anymore. Mm-hmm. So society as a whole isn't as concerned about creating physically fit and ready, adolescents. And, like we can get away with sitting on our butt all day, staring at a computer screen, and you don't need to be fit, but you do need to know how to code and,
yeah. But I don't think it's fitness though. I think it's I don't think fitness is the thing that we need to go after. I just think literacy is what we have to go after. Like, we have to have kids that are able to accomplish physical tasks, right? We have to have kids that can put their hands in the back of their head and lunge down a field if they had to. We have to have kids that can, fall on the ground and push themselves up and get to a standing position. I think that's what we need to get to, and that's what we're losing. We're losing physical literacy, and I'm not putting it on physical education. This is also shit that doesn't happen at home. But we're losing physical literacy because kids just aren't as active as a whole as they used to be, in my opinion.
We're so biased though. Like, the fact that we value that is not necessarily the norm.
No, I don't. Yeah, I think we're biased in that we see it. But I think if we were to poll, 10 of these people that are listening or watching, they would say, yeah, I do think that, 20 years ago, kids were more physically active than they are today.
Yeah.
And it's weird. I remember we talked about this a couple months ago. It had nothing to do with physical literacy or anything like that. But it's weird because there's like this fear. Kids or parents don't want their kids like going outside and playing because they're scared something's going to happen to their kid. It's like, I don't want my kid to get kidnapped. I don't want my kid to get hit by a car. I don't want my kid to get, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of fear in parents. And if you were to look at like the statistics and you look at, the amount of kidnappings and all of that stuff, those things have gone down drastically over the last 50 years, like drastically. So I don't know what it is specifically, but I'm pretty confident in saying that kids play less today than they did 20 years ago.
Book recommendation, The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt is a good one on that topic.
Yeah. He mentions that statistic in there.
Yeah, he talks about the kidnapping and there being a couple of very high-profile cases that caused some mass hysteria.
Yep.
But yeah, even though there's never been a safer time to be a kid in America, you see much more fear than there used to be.
Yeah. Just put a tracker on your kid. I don't know. Just put a tracker on him and feel safe.
Strap an Apple Watch to their wrist.
Let's not talk about Apple right now.
Carl had a bad customer service experience today.
We'll talk about Apple next week. That's next week's episode.
Do you think like part of the loss of physical literacy is because of the connection to sport and thinking that like movement isn't movement for life, movement is movement for competing in sports?
That's a good question. As you started to ask that, my brain wanted to say, no, of course not. And then like I thought about it for a split second and I'm like, fucking of course, right? Because I think a lot of parents look at physical activity and they just automatically correlate it to performance, and by performance I do mean sport, because that's where you see a lot of parents and kids that really value physical activity and targeted exercise. They're trying to get better. They're trying to get their kids better at something specifically. And if you have a parent where they're like, my kid's not into sports, they don't enjoy it, what are they going to say? They don't need to exercise. Like, my kid doesn't need to be a high performer. My kid doesn't need to do goblet squats. What the hell is the point of that? Because they may have friends, right? Or they may see other kids where, they're hitting the agility ladder and doing seated box jumps for sport. And they're like, man, I don't need to do that stuff. My kid's in band and very academically focused, and we just don't need to exercise.
That was always the question. I can think of like countless times where parents would bring their kids into our gym and they want them to, train to get better at their sport. And, we're looking at like 7 and 9 and 11-year-olds. And it's always, how are you going to improve their agility? How are you going to make their vertical jump higher? It's like, these kids just need to learn how to control their bodies through space. Mm-hmm. Like, this kid is so awkward, doesn't know how to do an air squat. Like, can we just slow down? Let's stop thinking about the vertical jump for a moment and just start thinking about teaching him some basic movement patterns and
the fucked up thing is you could have sold them. You could have been like, oh yeah, like if this is what you want. I'm not saying you should have done this, but if this is what you want, this is the game plan, and the game plan wouldn't change to get the same outcome. You know what I mean? Like, you could have been like, yeah, we're going to learn how to move our bodies through space. We're going to get stronger, And that's going to make your kid jump higher, run faster, and to be more agile, just because they're going to be stronger humans. But yeah, they see this shit on YouTube where, you have the impressive kid running through the agility ladder. Yeah, that's where that comes from.
Yeah. So how do we fix it? Like, who is doing a good job at improving physical literacy for kids? And like, is it on a school level that you see things improving? Do you want to see it outside of that? How do we fix this?
Oh gosh, Brand X is doing an outstanding job. Obviously, Brand X has PYCC, so it's a CCP-ish course for youth. So there's coaches that are like out there and they're pushing it and they're super passionate about it. But the reality, in my opinion, with kids is it starts and ends with parents. It just does. It starts and ends with parents, because you don't have 8-year-olds that are going out there looking for coaches for themselves. You know what I mean? You have parents looking for coaches for their 8-year-olds. And I don't even think that 8-year-old needs a coach, right? Like, they just have to have a parent that understands just basic human movement and what we need to do, like what physical literacy is. So it's a lack of education from the parent standpoint. And that's not just in physical expression. It's also in lifestyle and nutrition. Something that's always really, really bothered me since I had my first kid 10 years ago. Gosh, it's been 10 years. Was going to restaurants and them always giving us a kids menu. And you sit down and you're like, well, fuck this. Like, it's crazy the meals that kids are supposed to eat. It's insane. What you should actually do is you should take that kids menu, put it over here, put the adult menu over here, and the kids should be eating off the adult menu, and the adults should be eating off the kids menu. Why? Because kids' brains are developing, right? Kids need more high nutrient-based meals than adults do. We're fully grown. We can get by with shitty food and all that, but kids actually can't get by they can get by. They're not going to sprout and they're not going to develop to their highest potential on hamburgers and french fries, right? But that's what parents think that they need to feed their kids because it's on the kids menu. And we blame parents for that. We're like, how are they fucking feeding their kids? It's because the fucking society's telling you to feed your kids that. So if the parent doesn't know what to feed their kid, what are they going to do? They're going to look at the kids menu. They're going to give that to their kid. They're going to say, this is a picture of this, point to what you want, and that's what I'm going to get you, right? And they have such good intentions in mind. But if they were educated and they knew that they should actually give their kids that adult menu, they probably wouldn't make those decisions. So it's the same thing with exercise. Parents just don't know, right? Someone needs to teach parents what their kids, what development should look like for their children. And I remember reading a blog James wrote 7 or 8 years ago, and it was performance based, but James was he's like, I'm going to propose what development in sports should look like for your kid based on where they're at. And I remember looking at that, and I had a 2-year-old at the time, and I'm like, this makes a lot of sense, right? It's it starts off like this, and then if you want it to get like this, it can get like that. But he laid out reasons as to why it looked like this at first, just exploring new things, having different challenges, exploring those movement patterns that kids should be exploring at that time. And I kind of looked at that and I used it with my kid. I was like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. But if a kid doesn't, or if a parent doesn't know any better, and they're, on their couch and they're watching college football every Saturday, and they have a 2-year-old next to them, and they're like, I want my 2-year-old to be that. What is that parent going to do? That kid turns 4. Well, let's put this fucking kid in pads, and I want him to go out and run around like a chicken with his head cut off and play football. And they do that from 4 to 14, and that's all they've ever done. And they're so specific on that one sport, and the kid fucking burns out by the time he's 15. He's like, I want to play this. I've been forced to play this my entire life. This shit's boring. And now you just wasted 15 years of that kid's life in terms of physical activity and what that kid had in front of him in terms of challenges. So yeah, that was a really long way to say that it starts and ends with the parents.
What age, like, let's go down this rabbit hole a little bit. Like, at what age do you think it's ideal for a kid to start getting a little bit more sports specific?
Oh gosh, I don't know. It depends on the sport. It depends on what that kid wants and what that parent wants. Because if we were to talk about ice skating or figure skating, that's a lot different than basketball, right? But my advice would be to play as many sports. Like if your kid wants to play sports, play as many sports as possible for as long as possible until the kid says, I don't want to play any other sport except for this one. I think that's best practice. And if your kid falls so in love with a specific sport when they're 7, 8, 9 years old, you have to fight them on that, and you have to convince them to play other sports, but you have to have good reasons behind it. Like Colton, the kid just wanted to play football. And I'm like, dude, you're not going to just play football for the next 10 years, right? Like, he didn't want to play an instrument. He didn't want to play soccer. He didn't want to do BJJ. He didn't want to play baseball. He's like, I just want to play football because I love it. I'm like, that's awesome. But actually doing this is actually going to make you a better football player, right? You know, learning BJJ is going to make you a better tackler. You're going to be a better grappler. You're going to have better grip strength. You're going to have more coordination. And it, like, a light bulb went off in his head, and he's like, oh my gosh, I want to play as many sports as possible.
Yeah.
Because it's true though, right? Like, you know, doing a lot of shit makes you really good at a lot of shit, but it also makes you really good at this specific thing because you learn how to manipulate and move your body and how to overcome physical challenges in this specific sport because you did it in a different way over here. You know, you just look at a lot of, well, let me look at my situation specifically. Me playing baseball very, very competitively made me a way better football player because my hand-eye coordination got really, really good at catching footballs, right? From, you know, trying to hit this little thing coming at me 80 miles per hour. So there's a lot of carryover in sport and experiences, right? Like, you know, if you get so married to one sport over a long period of time and you get to a point where you're like, I'm just tired of this, it's like, what are your options? You're probably going to walk away from sport and physical activity. And I'm not saying every kid needs to play sports, but I think it's extremely beneficial for kids to have that outlet. I'm not saying they need to be, you know, the best at that sport year round. But it's a really positive outlet for kids to express themselves physically. There's a lot that comes along with, like, team sports and stuff like that for kids.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, the opportunity to, you know, socialize and work together as a team for a common goal. Like, there's got to be a lot of growth inside of that.
Yeah, but don't be a 9-year-old exercising just to get better at that sport.
No. Colton got a good single leg at BJJ the other night.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, he's figuring it out.
Yeah. You're his favorite coach. I told you that.
So sweet. Do you want to talk a little bit about OPEX Youth and what we're doing there?
Yeah. So if it's not obvious to the people watching or listening, we have a very, very strong relationship with Brandex, and we have a partnership with Brandex. And, you know, we have OPEX gyms. They have Brandex training centers. And, you know, those are obviously two different things because we don't focus on youth, right? Like, that's not our model. They only focus on youth. So, you know, this was a question that was posed internally about 3 years ago of, like, how do we add this youth thing to our model in an effective way? So it was like, you know, is it individual design? Obviously not, right? Like, we don't want, you know, 6, 7, 8-year-old kids having, like, personal coaches and getting program designs through Coach RX and stuff like that. So we really vibed with Brandex's model and how they did that and how they looked at different areas of progression in terms of, you know, movement literacy. And we had a lot to do with building their latest PYCC course. James is all over it, and James is super passionate about that stuff. So, you know, over the past 9 months, we put together a subgroup inside of our OPEX Gyms model, and we've been betaing. Is that good?
Yeah, that works.
Cool. Sorry if it's not. We've been betaing this OPEX Youth program, and we took some principles from from PYCC. We kind of married those with some principles that we talk about and really, really believe in OPEX. And that's OPEX Youth. So a number of our gyms will be incorporating that in their facilities over the next few months here.
Yeah, I mean, the dream is not just to like make adults physically fit, it's to be able to impact their families and be able to create, OPEX gyms that are servicing that entire family and all, enjoying and engaging in fitness together.
Yeah. And, our beacon inside of that program is movement literacy. It's not performance. To the point where, when this thing is rolled out and a parent comes in and they ask the question of how does my kid move quicker, we tell them that's not what we're about. We're about X, Y, and Z. May there be some carryover? Absolutely. But we have to be really, really clear that we're just we want to set these kids up to fall in love with fitness. That's it. And there's a lot of components to that. There's falling in love with movement. There's learning about, nutrition and lifestyle things, very, very basic nutrition and lifestyle things, and just ingraining that into a 4 or 5-year-old's head. That's super powerful.
What advice do you have for parents who are thinking about this, or even coaches who work with parents who are like struggling to get their kids excited and wanting to move and eat their broccoli and all the things we know that are good for us?
Oh man, that was a bunch of different questions. Let's start with eating your broccoli. You have to not care if your kid doesn't like broccoli specifically. You have to work with kids. Almost like trying to get that 2-year-old to play college football. You're probably going to fail. I know that some of those kids, 1% of those kids do, and they succeed and they're in the NFL one day. But if you force your kids to do anything, there's like this inherent thing of like not wanting to do it because I feel like I'm being forced to do it. So something that we mess around with in terms of like vegetables, it's like give your kid the choice, put the onus on your kid. If you go grocery shopping with your children, maybe have them pick, and this is what we do. It's like, hey, you pick your 2 favorite vegetables for the week and you pick your 2 favorite fruits for the week. And they're super excited because they have like some say, they pick it. And then when it's time to eat it, they have like this sense of like, yeah, I picked this, right? So, just making your kids a part of that process is really, really important because it's going to, and I tried this, it's going to fail 100% of the time when you say you're not getting up until you finish that broccoli. It's just not going to work, right? So it's almost like that push and pull, but you have to have boundaries as well. And something that we found that works as well is, when we do have a plate of whatever, whether it's protein, a carb, or a fat, and, the kid just doesn't want to eat it for whatever reason, it's like, hey, cool, you don't have to eat it, but your next meal is going to involve those things that's on that plate. Not a big deal. That might be later, that might be tomorrow, but you're going to finish the food that's on that plate. You don't have to do it right now. But I think just putting the onus on the kids a little bit, and just figuring out what works for them, right? Because kids' taste buds are weird. We have 2, and they have completely different tastes. Colton's been a vegetable monster his entire life, and Carson is like the kid I just described, where it's like he has to go and pick things out to feel like that ownership and feel really good about eating it. And then on the exercise part, encourage your kids to play. Yeah, have boundaries with electronics. That's what's keeping kids inside. It's because they have something that they deem to be more entertaining inside of the house that's not outside. So you have to have boundaries on those things. Very easy as a parent to say, here's this iPad. It's 9:00 in the morning. Have at it until 6 p.m. Really, really easy because that kid will be really quiet. They'll be entertained and they won't be on your side the entire time. But you have to create those boundaries for yourself almost, where it's like, I know this is the easy answer, but I need to have boundaries on these electronics, and I really need to encourage play. I need to encourage free play. And last thing, sorry, I keep adding ands. Explore and see what your kids enjoy. And when you figure out what your kids enjoy and like what inspires them, just lean into it like really, really hard. And that's what I found worked in terms of like activities, sport, hobbies, stuff like that. It's like explore a lot of different things, throw the things away that the kids are like, this is just not for me. And then once you find something that's for them, just lean into it.
Well, I'm very excited for this OPEX youth program and, seeing some great coaches help kids be more movement literate.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Yeah. So just to end it on that youth program, let's talk about stages really quick, and we'll end it on stages, because there's a big difference between a 3-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 16-year-old.
Sure.
So that's how we have it broken out. We have it broken out into 3 different stages that are based on development.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually took this from Brandex. So we have the Explore group. So Explore, we just bucket those into 3 to 8-year-olds. And what they're doing in resistance is they're just playing in resistance. So what an Explore session would look like for a 3 to 8-year-old would be, you come in, you prepare, right? So in that prepare thing, you do like some fun skills, and you do those skills independently, and you set those kids up for success. And then you move to practice. In that practice session, that's where you're doing your resistance training. So you just lay out, it could be like a circuit style, or it could be like American Ninja Warrior style. And you, as the parent or the coach, you're just setting up these obstacles to ensure that they're hitting every movement pattern across this thing. So just imagine like a 15-minute window. I have this American Ninja Warrior course set up, and on the first one, it's something that they have to like lunge to. It's like, okay, we're lunging. This next one, we're pulling something from this side to another. It's like, okay, we have core. Now they have to like somehow pull themselves up onto like this 30-inch box and get over. It's like, okay, they pulled, right? So you just set up these obstacles based on the 6 movement patterns. And that's like your resistance training with those kids for the day. And then when you get into the play portion, so we have prepare, practice, and play, you're just doing, steady state aerobic work. You're playing games where you start a clock, and you don't even need to make the clock visible to them, but you're like, okay, I want you guys to do this task. And it's like, I want it to be 5 minutes, right? Or maybe even 3, but you ensure that they're doing it at a very steady pace. And that's their aerobic work for the day. And then you move on, and you just get more complex as you get into this group and then to this group. So let me just walk through them, because I don't want to be super general.
Go for them. I gotta say though, that like Ninja Warrior style resistance training, that's my idea of fitness. I want to set that up in the gym tomorrow morning.
Yeah, that's awesome, right? Maybe we do that on Sunday.
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. The next piece is Express. So that's up to 13 years old after they go through that explore stage. So in this stage, we're practicing skills, 3 skills independently in that prepare section, and then we get to resistance, and now we're doing like splits with these kids. So now we might bring out some kettlebells. Now we might bring out some medicine balls, and we might be doing some intentional resistance training. And they're on a 2-day split. So day 1, they're doing these movement patterns. Day 2, they're doing these movement patterns, and they're just rotating A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B until they get out of that piece. And the goal there is to learn to control their bodies under external rotation, external load.
Got it.
So big difference, right? Like you can't do that with a 3-year-old. You just can't. Now you get to this stage, and it starts to look a lot like resistance training. And then we get into that last piece, or the aerobic piece, and now we're doing steady state intervals, or steady state work, and we're doing intervals, right? So you can now put them on an implement, right? Like if a 13-year-old, it's like, yeah, I want you to get on this assault bike for 5 minutes. We're gonna rest 3 minutes, and I want you to do that 2 times. And we're going to play a little game here. I want you to stay at the exact same pace on that second one as you did the first one. And then you're doing, more steady state work with those. So it'll look very similar to what you did with those really young ones. And then now we get into the Excel group. That's like your older group. And now that's like the transition from, being a kid to an adult. So this one's it's strange when you look at like development of males versus females. the difference between a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old, right? Because there's some kids that develop so quickly. Like you'll have some females that go through puberty at 11, 12 years old, right? So when we say this group, they could actually get into this group a lot quicker. But let's just say this is the transition into adulthood or just having an individual design coach. Now you're doing a 3-day split that's based on patterns. Now you're doing hard intervals in that last section. So now you're really starting to express some things. But it's all still aerobic work. So the idea here is to do resistance training and aerobic work in a very progressive manner from the age of 3 all the way up to 18, and then get a coach, right? Get a coach and do fitness, do individual designed fitness that's built for you.
And because you've created that habit from 3 years old, it's going to be an easy transition.
Yeah. Yep. So, I mean, you do that 3 days a week with a kid, and the other 4 days of the week you play games. That's it, right? But I think best case scenario, maybe not best case, because I think every person is different, but a really good scenario is if you don't have to worry about this shit. You're just like, my kid is so physically active. They play all the time. They're really good movers. Maybe they don't even need to go to the gym, you know?
Just scrap that entire conversation.
Yeah. I think that's ideal though, right?
Yeah.
It's like if you don't need fitness to cover something up for you. There's a lot of cool learnings that come with resistance training and stuff like that, but we don't want to turn kids off of that stuff. So you got to be really careful. You got to be really careful.
Forcing it down their throats.
Yeah, you got to be really careful, because just like forcing broccoli down their throat, they can develop an aversion to broccoli and never want it again. If you force fitness down their throats, they can develop an aversion to fitness, and we don't want that with kids.
Yeah, I mean, parents' intentions have got to matter too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And gosh, I feel lucky that I haven't experienced this, but I think about like some of the parents of girls that I grew up with, and it was like, you have to go do this like physical activity so you're skinny and you lose some weight.
Mm-hmm.
And just hearing that from some parents, like that's really brutal, and that stays with kids, and that creates a really unhealthy relationship with movements. So
yeah, it's tough, but you gotta feel for some of those parents that not those ones specifically, but you gotta feel for the parents that start to see physical changes in their kids that they think are unhealthy, and they just don't know what the hell to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We had a neighbor reach out to us, and the neighbor was like, can this kid come and get trained by you? Because this kid never moves, and this kid is getting fat. I keep saying this kid because I don't want to say like he or she. This kid is getting like fat, and I don't know what to do. And I was like, no, I'm not going to train your kid. He's 9. I don't think he needs a personal trainer, but let's have a conversation on some things that you could possibly incorporate to just make him healthier if you think he's going down this like unhealthy path and he's not ever outside playing. So yeah, you got to feel for those parents that just don't know what to do. And those are the parents that go to, the commercial gym, and they're like, I'm willing to spend whatever it takes. I just want my kid to be healthy. A lot of those parents don't care like about their kids' aesthetics or anything like that, or their performance. They're just like, I just want my kid to be healthy. I want to set him up. And there's not a lot of places that you can trust as a parent and bring your kid and be like, boom, I'm gonna leave him here, and I know that their intentions are really good, and they're gonna come out of this thing with results, right? Healthy habits and all of that. So that's what we want to build.
Well, coaches, even if you're not working with a youth population, go out there and help the parents, because that's going to trickle down.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I keep extending this conversation. I'm sorry. But think about healthy parents. I know a couple health conscious parents that don't give a shit about the rest of their family. I do. But most health conscious adults like feed that stuff down in the household, right? Like they make those changes that they made with themselves with their children. They make the changes that they made with themselves with their spouse, right? Like the whole house kind of takes it on. So yeah, there is a lot to, people that are coaching parents, talk to your clients about what they're doing with their kids, and help them out there, you know, because they may not know better, because I've worked with a lot of mothers and fathers that they were bought in, like themselves, they were completely bought in, but they were going out for dinner, ordering their family, you know, the cheeseburgers and French fries, and ordering themselves, like, you know, steak and salad and rice. You know what I mean? It's like, well, what are you doing? Like, you got to pass those habits. You got to pass those habits along. So there's a lot of opportunity to pass those really good habits over to the entire household. And yeah, that's we're kind of known as the household in our neighborhood of, like, we're weird, right? Like, we're weird. We don't eat stuff like that. We don't drink stuff like that. You know what I mean? It's like we're the odd ones out. But you have some families that, you know, the mom or the dad are, like, you know, very, very health conscious, and they don't even think to push those habits, you know, to the rest of their family. And usually it's based on pleasure.
Yeah.
It's a nice thing to see your kids, like, enjoy things. So, and food isn't eliminated from that. It's really, you feel good when you're like, hey, do you guys want some ice cream? You know what I mean? Some parents just do that shit every day.
Yeah, I mean, important side note though, you're not depriving your kids of the occasional treat and
No, habits.
enjoyment of meals out or anything
just
like that.
Just habits. Yeah. Like, you know, our kids know that you don't go outside and, you know, go to the neighbor's house and, you know, eat Pringles at their, you know what I mean? Like, that's just not what we do on a day-to-day basis. Not deprive, like, you can have a treat and stuff like that every now and again, but, like, we're not having that for a snack after dinner on a Tuesday. You know, that's just not what we do. But they have to know why you don't do it.
I have to tell that to my husband too. This is why we don't have chips on a Tuesday. Oh. Well, guys, as always.
Oh, and one more. No, I'm joking.
You're done? You're done?
I was like,
we're okay.
What the fuck?
We're filming this in the afternoon, and normally we go in the morning. So,
I got a second win, though. I feel really good.
It was that coffee.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Coffee.
Yeah, it's the OPEX Sustain.
Coffee. Well, guys, remember, Carl's going to pay you $16,000 if you leave us a review.
Now it's 17,000.
17. Feeling really good.
Don't say dollars. I just said 17,000.
Oh, 17,000.
Don't know what it is.
Could be
17,000
air hugs.
Likes on your. You can't like anything more than
positive thoughts. You'll send them positive thoughts.
Yeah, 17,000 positive thoughts. Yeah.
I'm a little delirious. It's the afternoon. All right, guys. Please make sure you do subscribe and leave us a review, and we'll see you next week.